Okay, we'll just start it by you saying, when you start, just say only one time, my name is Arie Van Mansum, I was born in such and such a year in such and such a place. Okay? Will you start that way? Are you ready?
Yeah. My name is Arie Van Mansum. I'm born in Utrecht in Holland on March 5th, 1920. And since 1958 I live in Ottawa, Canada.
Where did you grow up? Could you tell us a bit about your childhood?
Sure. I was born in Utrecht, but my parents moved to Maastricht when I was age 6. I lived in Maastricht till 1958 when I immigrated to Canada. I went to school in Maastricht and went to high school as well. My parents were just simple people who never got any education, but my father was a laborer with the Dutch Railroad. And they gave me Calvinistic upbringing. We were strict religious.
Calvinist?
Calvinistic, yes. And we already taught from the beginning, that we're not allowed to hate, but to love everybody.
What about your mother and father? What were they like?
We had a fantastic marriage and had a very good relationship with each other and were an example for us.
What was life in Maastricht like? How big?
Maastricht, of course, was not such a large city. It was, for our young people, it was large, of course, but there were about 100,000 people living there. The majority of Maastricht is Roman Catholic, about 99.25% is Roman Catholic. We were just a very small minority. And of course, we went to a separate school, our own school, had to walk about 30 minutes to school and back forth. And there was also a small Jewish community in Maastricht. I didn't know any Jewish man there, only from hearsay. But they just moved around. The people just like normal. There was no anti-Semitism in our city whatsoever.
How big was the Jewish community?
I think there were about 80 families. 80 families and a small synagogue. But there were all families who lived there for years and years, from one generation up to the other, until 1932, when Hitler started to persecute the Jewish people in Germany. And then many new Jewish families moved into our city, coming from Germany. And then we were aware, that something was happening in Germany, and that those people have to fled for anti-Semitism there and what Hitler did to them. So
you started becoming more conscious?
That's right. For example, in our classroom when I was in grade school, all of a sudden a few new children came in, they couldn't speak Dutch. And then of course we were wondering why they came to Holland and what happened to them. And he talked about the way they came from Germany and that they had to flee Germany towards Holland. And that of course became more and more aware of what happened there. Till 1938, 39, of course, more and more Jewish people fled from Germany. First they came legal, later on they came illegal. And then the city of Ottawa set up a committee from different religions to
look at what?
The city of Maastricht. Set it up and a committee from people from different religions to help those people as soon as they arrived in Maastricht. And
you were how old?
I was about 18, 19 years of age. They asked I wasn't very active in our young people society among our young people. So they asked also a representative from our church to be part of that committee. And our church asked me if I was willing to do that. So I went to several meetings in City Hall to discuss the problems with people coming from Germany.
When did things begin to get worse?
When things began to get worse, of course, was May 1940 when the Germans came to Holland. We didn't expect it in the first place. First we thought we just had a military occupation, like they had in Belgium. But later on, slowly, the Germans and the Nazis were taking over all our organizations.
What?
For example, we had our Christian radio broadcast organization. They took the top away and put another Nazi in the head of it. They closed all our young people societies. They changed all the newsprint paper. Of course, you still had the same newsprint paper, but they took the editor away and put a Nazi editor in his chair. And that's what they do step by step by step. Then, of course, came the time that everybody had to wear an identification card. So we had to go to a local office, and they made a picture of you. Or you had to bring a picture along, of course, and they put your fingerprint on the card, and everybody so in that way was identified. So in case there was a razzia, whatever it is, when police was asking you, first thing you had to do, pick up your identification card and show you who you are.
They were all the same, these cards?
And no, they were not all the same because the Jews had to put in J on it. With a big black stamp, they put in J on it. Now first, because Holland was so over-organized, everybody was registered in the city hall, your religion, and whatever happens. So the Jewish people, of course, scared that if they would say, I'm Protestant or I'm Roman Catholic or I'm nothing, then they would find out, they would think, well, maybe they want something.
How did the people you knew, how did you react to this idea of a special J on people's cards?
We didn't like that, of course, but you know, the method of the Germans was doing step by step. Not hit you all of a sudden, then of course you would have a big outcry, but you had just step by step, slowly, you know, say, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. First, of course, you have to ask for the identification card, you know, and they use that as an argument, of course, it's wartime and something might be killed, and then we find on your body who we are. And then, of course, later on, they started with put a J on the Jews, and those people were scared because they were afraid that they found out who they were. But they said, well, don't worry, that's only what we asked for, nothing else. And as soon as they had the J on the card, they started to put trustees in their organizations, trustees in their business. They took away the money, you know. Slowly, you had to put all the money in a special accounts, and you were not allowed to touch it anymore. Let them move to smaller houses. And then, of course, came the time that they had to wear the famous yellow star. And, of course, they couldn't say no, because already had a J on the card. So if he was walking the street and all of a sudden there was a policeman would ask him, listen, let me see your identification card, and they saw the J on the card. They say, hey, where's your star? Now,
how did you react to this?
Well, we as Christians were very upset about it. And in the beginning, of course, what we did, the first couple of weeks, when we saw Jewish people walking the street with a star, we lifted our head to greet them.
How?
So, you know, to greet them. And of course, we tried all kinds of ways to be sympathetic to them, and to friendly to them, you know.
Were you aware of who the Jews were before that?
Not all. I was surprised that many people on the street, you know, who came out with a J there. I didn't know there was a Jewish man. Of course, there was never that distinction between Jews and non-Jews in our community.
What other restrictions were there?
Well, as soon as they started to wear the J, of course, then you got the star. Then you got, of course, the signs on the park. Public parks were not allowed. There was a sign in front of the park, Jewish people not allowed. All the restaurants, there was a sign, they had to put a sign in the window, Jewish people not allowed. They had in theaters, in movie theaters, wherever were public gatherings, there was a sign, Jewish people not allowed. And of course, while wearing the star, you know, they could do nothing.
Were there certain things you couldn't get if you were Jewish? Like, did anybody ever ask you to prove if you were Jewish or not to get something? Not
at that moment, no. You could free go to the store and go and buy, and they got their cards. Of course, the problem was also that what the Germans did, they put in Jewish organizations, Jewish committees who looked after their own people. And they had one man, and they was the spokesman for them, you know. So they have their own office, and if they want to go for a trip, for example, from Maastricht to Amsterdam by train, they had to ask for a permit. They were not allowed to move around. You know, those things would happen, yeah.
I think you tried to get insurance at one point.
Pardon me?
Did you try to get insurance at one point? You had mentioned something about wanting to get life insurance.
Oh yeah, sorry. When I, of course, because all the money of the Jewish people were in trust held by the Germans. Even if they have proceeds coming to them from life insurance policies, they want to know if you were Jewish or not, because if something would happen, the money couldn't go to the beneficiary, but have to go, of course, to the German, to the trustee. So when I applied one day, I was about 40 years of age, and I thought, well, it's about time I take out my life insurance policy. So I called a life insurance agent in Maastricht. He said, can you come over tonight, and I'd like to discuss with you some life insurance. So he came to my place, and he filled in the application. I picked the plan I most liked, and gave him the down payment. And then before he left, oh, hold on, he said, there's one form you have to sign, because that's a requirement that's set by the Germans. I have to sign a statement that he was a non-Jew, that was so-called an Arier. And I rejected to do that. Said, no, I will never do that. He said, what's wrong with that? You can just sign that. I said, no, under no conditions, none of their business. So I didn't sign. He said, well, I'm sorry, then you're gonna go ahead with issuing the policy. Well, it's too bad, but I don't want it.
Why wouldn't you sign it?
Because I think that I hated the distinction between non-Jews and non-Jews. You know, because behind it was the anti-Semitism from Nazi Germany, and that's what I didn't want.
Was everybody reacting like that?
No, not everybody. I guess the majority took it. They said, well, it's too bad and we don't like it, but well, what else can you do, you know? More in a negative way.
Why do you think the difference?
Well, it depends on the personality, of course. I think it also has to do with your principle, with your conscience, and you know, and with your religion, of course, as well. I mean, I never went after the fast buck. So, you know, some people say, well, if it's on my own benefit, I hate it, you know, and that's about it.
They thought they would lose money or something?
That's right, yeah. That's right. Yeah. They were all against the majority was against what the Germans did. However, as long as it didn't cost them any money. As soon as they, you know, came to them personally, then all of a sudden they were scared.
But others were like you?
That's right, yeah. Oh, yeah. Quite a few people, yeah.
How did you begin to become more involved in this?
Of course, I was quite involved in the Young People's Societies of our church. I was a provincial chairman, so as a result I knew quite a few people in our province from my churches. And I was approached by an auditor from the income tax department in our city, who was a member of the church, if I was willing to take on the responsibility in our province of distributing illegal papers. And after discussing with one of his friends who came over for that purpose from Amsterdam, I was willing to do that because I was a traveling salesman. So as a result, I visited all cities. I went from one train to the other. I had bus passes, so nobody would suspect me was traveling around. And that way, I built up a network of people in our province who were willing to take on bundles of illegal papers and hand it out to other people in the community. That's the first start, of course. That the first starts in my work as an illegal worker, an underground worker. Then my friend from my church, who was with the income tax department, had a family who were afraid what was going to happen to them in the future.
Why?
And because they have heard about what happened in Germany, and it before something that happened in our city, we like to move away and find a hiding place. Now he had a relative in the central part of Holland, in Apeldoorn, who said, well, that family can stay here. Maybe you find somebody who is willing to bring him there, because those people are scared in the train, you know, to travel. You know, the idea that you have to travel with a permit and with a star on your body, sitting in the train without permit and without star, gave you the feeling of being, you know, you're scared. So they would like to have somebody with them who was non-Jewish, but who could give them a warning if something would happen. So I went along with his family and to Apeldoorn and brought him to that relative of my friend, and he was staying there for the rest of the war.
What was happening to Jews at this point? What year was this and what was happening?
It was in 1941, 1942. There were already big razzias in Amsterdam. And they took out razzias, they took the Jews from their houses and brought them to ghettos, where they had to stay together.
And business?
And the business was taken away and was given to Nazi friends, to Dutch people who were Nazis. And they run the business in our city and as well in Amsterdam. And that, you know, step by step, we found out that, you know, that the day was there that he would pick up the Jewish people and bring them to the concentration camp. We knew they have set up a big camp in the northern part of Holland, called Westerbork, where they brought some Jews already. They picked up some Jews, they suspected them from anti-German activities. They picked them up already without any form of process and put them in the camp there. So that more and more people were aware that one of those days they would be picked up.
Mm-hmm. What happened to you next?
And by being involved in the underground movement, I was approached by an inspector of the local police who told me, he said, I have a family, good friends of mine, there's a widow with 2 children, who are looking for a place to go. Could you find one for them? I promise you, if I find out that something will happen to you beforehand, I'll let you know. Because as an inspector of the local police, it was easy for him to find out something, because they had contact with the Germans. I promised him to do that. And one night I went over to the people he introduced me to, Mrs. Vrij and her 2 teenage children.
Widow? Or was she married?
She was a widow. Her husband passed away in 1939. He introduced me to her, and I promised her that I would do my best to find a place for them. So I went to the eastern part of our province, where lots of coal mines are, and lots of people living who works in the mines. And in a grocery store, I found a place for Mrs. Vrij and her daughter, under the promise that she was willing to help out with cooking and with cleaning the house and so on and so on. Then she asked me, when I told her that I have a place for you and your daughter, I'm still looking for one for your son. And she said, will you promise me? He is my only one. Save him, please, she begged me. And I said, well, I promise you, I will look for a place for him as well. So all 3 together left the house one night. I brought those lady, the widow with the daughter, to Heerlen by train. They took up the star, they gave it to me. And the boy, Fritz, I took along to my own place. I said, okay, you're going to stay in my home. We didn't have a large home, but a small home. And it was in the row houses, so it was, not comfortable. You stay in our place for 2 or 3 days till I find a place for you. So he stayed for 3 days at our place.
Did you tell your mother?
Yes, my mother was at home, of course, so he had to know that, because she's, I always came to my mother with emergency cases. I never told her in advance what was going to happen. And you say, Mom, listen, I have a boy and the Germans are looking after him. They want to take him to camp. Do you mind if he stay at our place for 2 nights? Oh, that's okay, she said, as long as not more than 2 nights. She said, that's okay. So he came to our place, and after 2 nights staying at our place, my mother said, I like him so much, please let him stay here.
So he stayed?
So Fritz stayed for the rest of the war at our place. He became a close friend. We shared the same room, and he helped me in everything I did. He gave me advice. He introduced me to the Jewish community, of course, more. If anyone of the people asked me for a hiding place, I asked him who was that, and he told me who it was. So that way
How old was he?
At the time, he was my age. He was 20 years of age when he came to our place.
So he became part of the family?
He became part of the family. He ate with us on the table, and he was usually sitting in the living room, except as soon as a visitor came, he had to go upstairs, and hide himself in the bedroom till the visitors were gone, because we have to act normal. And so
how did he live?
Pardon me?
What was life like for him there?
What life was for him was he was not allowed to go out at all. He had to stay in the small house we had. Only at night, and it was dark, we let him go in the backyard to get some fresh air. For the rest of the day, he was sitting in the home, reading books. We borrowed books all over the place for him, and did games with him, played games with him, and whatever. He helped my mom in cleaning the dishes, for example, and preparing nice dishes, whatever.
Why were you so nervous about him?
Because first of all, he was typical Jewish outlook. You could say, I asked him, you want to have a false identification card? He said, you cannot give me 10. He said, they still see that I'm a Jew. So they could find him. But then also, our neighbor was a Nazi man. He was a member of the National Socialist Party. Quite often came home in Nazi uniform. So we had to be very quiet. If they would know about it, then they would tell the Nazis. And of course, my parents would be arrested, and I would be arrested myself, and then they would take him away. So we had to be very, very quiet about it. For example, my father had made a kind of a hiding place for him in case something would happen, that we could hide under the ground and in a kind of crawl space on the floor.
Where was that? Where was this?
In our house.
What did he make?
He opened up a wall cupboard that we had, and he opened up the floor, and then you could go downstairs under the floor in a dark room. This wasn't in the basement at all. So he said, in case of emergency, he said, you can always fly there and you can hide yourself. So one night, approximately 1 o'clock, we were in bed sleeping. All of a sudden, somebody rang the bell, the house bell. Now, we never opened up the door. We never did that because we want to give our guests the opportunity to go away. Even if somebody called at the door during the daytime, we always would go upstairs, look out the window upstairs to see who it was, and then open up the door. So my mom did open up the window upstairs, look out of the window, and there, lo and behold, there were 2 German soldiers standing in front of the door. She went to her bed, come on, get out, get out. The 2 Germans here on the door, they want to get in. So we had a good rehearsal. We went to the hiding place. We made lots of mistakes, of course, quite obviously. We forgot to take our pajamas away, and so on and so on. But anyhow, when we were in the hiding place and everything was finished, we thought it was almost an hour, but they opened up the door, and there were 2 soldiers, they were in the wrong place. They had to go to the neighbor's place. So they asked, I'm here at the Verwijs place. That was the name of the neighbors. I said, no. Oh, sorry, they said. So they left and went to the neighbor's place. So, those things, but it was a good rehearsal.
Thanks. Let's change tapes. We've run out of time on tapes, so take a break from that. Good. I guess what I was going to ask you next is, where are we going from here? We're going to, moving right along, actually.